Some people overthink before a social interaction, and I used to overthink like my life depended on it. Not because I'm awkward, not because I don't know how to talk, but because in certain rooms, I didn't feel like a person. I felt like a verdict. Like one wrong sentence could shrink me, like one awkward pause could expose me, and like one mistake could confirm what my fear already believed. And I didn't realize I was living like that until a certain meeting. I was at a school that had offered me my first scholarship. It was me and both of the coaches in the room at that time. And I wasn't just there to talk, I was there to prove something. I was there to prove myself, and I was there to figure out what my next steps were going to be. I wanted to be an example. I wanted to show them that they had made the right choice, and I wanted to hold my own in a room that felt much bigger than me. I walked in tense because I didn't know what was coming. But here's what I didn't realize. Even if they had said nothing, I was already talking to myself. I sat down and I immediately started spiraling through everything that I could do wrong. And at first, the thought hit me and it wasn't practical and it wasn't even logical. It was insecurity, raw, and automatic. It was, I'm too skinny to play with the guys that I met. And once the thought entered the room, it didn't come alone. It brought a whole crew with it. You're not strong enough. You don't belong here. They offered you this, but you don't deserve it. You're about to get exposed. And it's wild because that meeting hadn't even actually started yet, but in my head, it already did. And in my head, I already had lost. I started stuttering, not because I didn't know what to say, but because my brain was trying to edit me in real time. I was correcting sentences in the middle of a sentence, like I was trying to save myself while I talked. My body overheated. I started sweating. I couldn't stop shaking, and I felt like the smallest man in the room. Not physically, spiritually, mentally. Like I was sitting in the room with coaches, but it was like I was sitting in a courtroom, and every word that I spoke was evidence against me. And here's the crazy part. I never even told them what was going on in my head, but I think they could tell something was wrong. And both coaches were super awesome. They both told me to calm down, to take a breath, and that really stuck with me. What they did in that moment still sticks with me to this day because I thought I was there to convince them, but they were already convinced. They had already seen everything they needed to see before the meeting even started and before I actually even met them. So why was I acting like I had to earn it all over again? And that's when I realized something later on. In that room, I wasn't trying to win a scholarship. I was trying to win permission to belong. And honestly, that feeling didn't start in that room. The feeling, and the first time I had that feeling of remembering and feeling too small was when I started playing soccer at 4 years old. I was playing with kids 2 years older than me, and when you're four, 2 years isn't just 2 years older. It's like you're playing against giants. They never treated me different, but I felt different. And that's what really mattered. Because sometimes social overthinking doesn't come from what people do to you, it comes from what you silently decide about yourself. At 4, I started learning a rule without ever saying it out loud. If I play well, I belong, and if I mess up, I'm exposed. And that rule followed me into bigger games, bigger rooms, bigger expectations, and bigger moments. It even followed me into my leadership because, in my mind, leaders are calm, cool, collected, and they are always confident. I thought confidence meant zero anxiety. I thought if you're really built for leadership, you don't shake in the small situations. But then I had to face the truth. It was one of my teammates If one of my teammates came to me and said, I'm really struggling. I don't feel like I belong. I don't know if I can be here." I wouldn't think that they were weak. I would just try to help them. I would help them to assess and figure out the situation and figure out what we can do to move forward. So, why did I call myself weak for that same feeling that somebody else was having? And honestly, that's what social overthinking really does. It creates a double standard, it creates grace for everyone else, and it puts pressure on you. And I realized something. My instinct in that room wasn't just to do better. My instinct was to run, to reject it before it could reject me, to say no thank you before anything was even said or offered. And that's not random. Pulling away has always been a defensive mechanism from a very young age, and silence has too. Because silence for me feels safe. If you don't say much, you can't mess up. If you don't reach out, you can't get rejected. If you don't step fully in, you cannot fully lose. But the cost is you also cannot fully connect. And this is where the faith side hit me. Because in that moment, God wasn't my first thought. I wasn't trusting him. I was trying to figure it out and control the outcome by myself. And I was trying to earn something that was already going to be rewarded. And 2 Timothy 1:7 became very personal. And it talks about God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. Fear was writing my script that day, not God. Proverbs 29:25 says, "The fear of man lays a snare." It's a trap. That's exactly what it felt like. It wasn't just an insecurity, it was a trap. And Galatians 1:10 asks a question that honestly it offended me the first time that I sat with it and that I read it. And it says, "Am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God?" Because I realized I wasn't just anxious, I was trying to worship approval. I was letting other people's opinion become the judge of my own worth. And breaking free starts when you can catch that. When you realize I'm not socially overthinking because I'm broken. I'm socially overthinking because I learned early that belonging had to be earned. But connection isn't earned, it's built. And there's a big difference. And in real confidence, isn't pretending you don't feel the fear, it's choosing to love and present even when fear does show up. Because when your identity is anchored in God, social situations stop being auditions and you can finally walk into a room and just be you. You don't have to worry about everything else. You can just worry about being yourself. In the second half of this episode, I'm going to dive a little bit deeper and talk about the shift that changed everything for me. How to go from performance to presence, how to stop treating every interaction like it's a test, how to build confidence in connection, not confidence in being impressive. Because you weren't created to live trapped in your own head. You were created to connect, build relationships, get out there and live life to the fullest. So when I left for college, when I left that college after my first visit, something hit me. Nothing bad had happened. The coaches were supportive, the opportunity was real, the door was open, and I had been handed a scholarship. But I almost disqualified myself in my own head before that meeting had even started. And sitting in the car afterwards, I realized something. Why am I trying to earn something that I had already worked for? Why am I fighting to prove myself in rooms I was invited into? There's a reason that I was invited there. And that was the big turning point for me. I realized I had to be proud of who I was and who I had built. And if other people don't agree with it, that's on them. It's not on me. I need to be proud of who I am. Social overthinking wasn't just annoying, it almost cost me relationships with my wife, with my brothers, with my friends. And it made me miss opportunities that I should have stepped and jumped into. And honestly, it drained me. I would leave what should have been a normal, low key interaction feeling exhausted, not because of what was said, but because of what I told myself afterwards, replaying it, editing it, and judging it. It's not connection, that's self surveillance. And you cannot build relationships while constantly evaluating yourself. Looking back at it now, one of the biggest areas of social overthinking that I've ever had was when I was able to go and attend the Idaho or the Western United States Olympic Development Program regional combine, which means they took the top players from all the states in a certain age group and they took us out. They took us to a school. We were all there to compete, play against each other, work towards making the regional team, not just the state team because I was already on the state team, but making the regional team and going competing for nationals and then making the national team. So at the time, I was only a couple steps away from making that national team. And I got out there, and all I could do was overthink everything. I was worried about what everybody else thought of me. I got in my head that I shouldn't be there. I wasn't enough. I wasn't good enough. It was a mistake. They didn't mean to call me there. And I was out there for a week, and by the second day, I was checked out. I mentally wasn't there. I was depressed. I was anxious and all I wanted to do was come home. And I really should have assessed that situation differently because I had the opportunity of a lifetime and I was only a few steps away from making it big, making that next step, really getting out there and finding teams and colleges in these different places. But because I was in my own head so much about an interaction I had with somebody at lunch, or the way that I looked at someone, or if I laughed at a joke that somebody was talking about, and then afterwards I would think, well, why did I even do that? I wasn't even part of the conversation. They probably think I'm stupid now, just spiraling down into that, and it really took a toll on me. So the realization that I didn't have to earn belonging came pretty quickly after that. But also, faith played a really large role in the whole thing. When I got to college and just started being myself, that first week, something changed. I didn't feel like I was performing anymore. I wasn't trying to stand out in the room. I was just being me. And I attracted a crowd that aligned with that. It was so freeing and it felt like a weight had been lifted off of my shoulders. I realized leadership wasn't about constantly proving, it was about leading by example, and there's a difference. If I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, people will see it. Leadership is not perfection. True strength isn't never shaking. True strength is showing up every day and trying again, no matter what happened yesterday. When I did go out to school, finally, after making a decision of which school I was going to go to, that first week was rough. And I was struggling with trying to connect with people and find friends and make an impact on the field and off the field. And I really felt like I had just fallen into a hole and there was no way out of it. But one thing that really stood out to me and that really caught my attention was after like day 2 or 3, I started realizing these other people, these other freshmen that had never met each other, started making connections and started talking and laughing and having fun. And I was still so worried about who I was and who I was trying to be that I was missing out on those opportunities. And I realized in that moment that everybody else was in the exact same situation as me. I was still in the United States where there was other people from other countries that had left their country to come over here and play, and they didn't know how it was going to work. They didn't know how it was going to go down. And once I realized that I wasn't alone in this and that everybody else knew exactly how I was feeling, I was able to start talking and making friends and building those relationships. And I have lifelong friendships and relationships because of that. So when my body reacts, when I start overheating or feeling that spiral coming, my chest starts to tighten, my brain goes into that spiral fog, I don't immediately assume that I'm just weak. I try to ask myself why. What am I afraid of right now? Everyone has anxiety about something. Even the people who look calm have some sort of anxiety about something. Even the leaders that you admire. Anxiety does not disqualify you, it just exposes what you're attached to in that moment. And honestly, the biggest change out of all of it for me was that I had to learn how to pray. Before, I prayed for answers, I prayed for signs, I prayed for blessings, but I wasn't working towards any of those. And I prayed for outcomes and I prayed for control. But I also wasn't walking through the situation with God. And the shift for me was that I shifted from asking to talking, and from fix this to walk with me. And that changed everything, because when you stop trying to control the outcome yourself, you stop performing and you start trusting. You still have to make those steps, you still have to act in faith, you still have to work towards those things you want to work towards. But if you're working and doing your part, and you have the confidence to trust that everything's going to work out how it's supposed to, your life is going to feel like it's rolling smoother, even with the setbacks and the challenges and the struggles, because we're all going to have them. And we just need to take the time to really focus on, are we praying for outcomes and control, or are we praying for the strength to get through whatever it is that we're getting through? And are we walking through the situation? When I feel the urge to go silent now, I know where it comes from. As a kid, silence for me was survival, and for a long time it was, if you don't say anything, you're not going to get hurt as bad, and you're not going to, it'll all be over sooner. And if you don't show much, then there's nothing for people to attack. But the thing that protects you at 6 years old, it really can limit you at 23 or 18 or 12 or even, you know, 10 years old, 10 years old. There's a difference there. And now, when I feel the urge to shrink, I fight for presence. And every time I stay in the conversation, instead of retreating, something happens. My interaction with the other person ends up getting better. The connection feels more real, and I leave energized and ready to do more instead of leaving drained. And there's a big difference there. So, here's kind of the framework that I use when I am struggling with that, and it's all about taking aim. But it's not just about catching the overthinking, it's about breaking it. So, A in AIM is for ask. Ask yourself, what am I trying to earn right now? Is it approval, respect, validation, permission to belong? Because most social anxiety isn't about the conversation, it's about what you think is on the line, not anybody else, what you think. I is for identify. Identify the lie. Is it, I don't belong? I have to perform. If I mess up, I lose this. Call it out. Call it out to yourself. Because most of the time, the fear isn't going into the room, it's being worried about who you will be in that room. And a lot of the time, the fear isn't coming from the room itself, it's coming from that old belief. And M is for move. Move towards the presence. Stay in the conversation. Say the sentence. Keep eye contact. And pray while you're walking through it. Don't retreat into silence. Don't move away. You need to move anyways. Because if you retreat into silence, none of this is going to help. And you don't need to move perfectly, you just need to move presently. No conversation is ever going to be perfect. No interaction is ever going to be perfect. But it's about moving and trying and getting over that overthinking block. Belonging is not something you prove to everyone. You don't have to be perfect to be valued. God does not need you to be flawless. And when you walk into a room now, remind yourself who you are, not who you're trying to impress. I've spent years overthinking in rooms that were never trying to remove me, in groups that were never trying to remove me, and in situations that were always trying to help me, but I was overthinking so much that it caused harm. I replayed conversations that nobody else remembers. I've tried to earn belonging in places I was already invited into. And here's what I finally understand. Overthinking isn't humility, it's fear dressed up as self awareness. It's control disguised as preparation, and it's the fear of man laying a trap. Proverbs 29:25 says, "The fear of man lays a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is safe." A snare is subtle. You don't see it until you've stepped into it, but once you're in it, everything tightens. It's hard to get out. And that's what social overthinking does. It tightens your word, it tightens your body, and it tightens your identity until you get to a point where you forget who you really are. But 2 Timothy 1:7 reminds me and reminds us, God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. Power, love, and a sound mind. Not spiraling thoughts, not courtroom pressure, not performance anxiety. Power means I don't shrink. Love means I move towards people instead of moving away from them. A sound mind means I don't let fear narrate my entire life. And Galatians 1:10 confronts me every time I feel the urge to perform. Am I trying to win the approval of human beings, or am I trying to win the approval of God? Because you cannot chase approval and chase freedom at the same time. You have to choose. It's not going to work. So here's the truth that I'm living by now. I don't have to earn my belonging. I don't have to prove that I deserve to be in the room. I don't have to be perfect to lead. I don't have to be flawless to be valued, and neither do you. If you've been overthinking every interaction, if you've been shrinking in rooms where you feel called out, and where you feel called to stand, if you've been replaying conversations and calling it growth, this is your line in the sand. Use aim. Ask what you're trying to earn, identify the lie, move towards presence anyway. But more than anything, you have to decide. Decide that you will not let fear narrate your entire identity anymore. Decide that you will not worship approval from other people. Decide that you will walk into rooms remembering who you are, not who they are, because your identity is anchored. When your identity is anchored in God, social situations stop being auditions and connection stops being a test. And you finally start measuring yourself against the giants. You just stand. Remember, the world doesn't need the perfect you, it needs the real you still trying.